Well, whatever's going on right now.
I want to thank you all for being here today. We are going to begin with a couple of opening statements from San Bernardino Police Chief Jared McBurblon and San Bernardino County Sheriff John McMahon. Chief Burblon.
Afternoon, everybody. We'd like to welcome everybody here today, as well as the first responders. Before we get started, I think it's important to note that we had well over 300 police officers respond to this incident, and for obvious reasons, we can't fit all of them in this room. Logistically, it's just not possible. We're here to remember the 14 victims who were killed and the 21 who were wounded in this tragedy. Wednesday's events had a tremendous impact on the city and on the county, and it affects all of us. We all know someone who was deeply affected by this tragic event. Many of the officers up here knew friends that were very close to the victims. There's been multiple requests to hear firsthand accounts from our responders. Our employees are very humble. They said that they were just doing their job that day. Today is about the victims. We're here to honor them and their families. Shannon Johnson, Banana Babedal, Aurora Godoy, Isaac Amenios, Larry Kaufman, Perry Bowman, Yvette Velasco, Sierra Claiborne, Robert Adams, Nicholas Thalasino, Tim Nguyen, Juan Espinoza, Damian Means, and Michael Lester. If you notice behind me, our officers and our deputies, everybody back there is wearing a black ribbon on their uniform. It is in remembrance of all of the victims, their families, and all of those affected by this horrible tragedy. Emergency personnel across this nation put on their uniforms every day with a willingness to serve their communities, and they do it proudly.
The real heroes are those who were in the room that day, who protected others and pulled injured out of the building. They acted selflessly and courageously, not thinking about what would happen to them, but what they could do to save someone else. We have heard victim stories of heroism during this time of the shooting. Heroes like Shannon Johnson, who shielded and comforted a coworker and said, "I've got you." These individuals were not trained on how to react to acts of terrorism, but did what they could to protect others. As you may know, many people responded to that day and the days that followed. Men and women who stepped up, as well as emergency personnel who rendered aid and continue to render aid today. Sadly, not everyone could be able to be here with us today. We have employees from dispatch who took the initial emergency call, some of the first responders that went into the building, and a detective captured on video evacuating staff, and officers who were involved in the officer-involved shooting. We are mourning not only here in San Bernardino County, but across our entire nation.
Okay, the first group that we're going to bring up is going to be the first entry team. They were the first group to assemble and go into the IRC building. And that's going to be Lieutenant Mike Madden, Detective Brian Lewis, Officer Brett Murphy, and Officer Sandoval was also there, but he was unable to make it here today.
Questions?
I have a question for you, we're now learning that the shooters had every intention of attacking first responders. Given that coming to light, what kind of crosses your mind now being able to look back at that situation?
I think for me going in and talking with some of the other officers, I think we all knew that that was a potential very real risk when we made the decision to go in to begin with. Just reflecting upon it after and talking with my friends, my family, my coworkers, you know, it hits home. It hits home for all of us, but again, it's what we're supposed to do.
For the other officers, describe your mindset walking in, what it was like there, and also why you do something like this. Because a lot of people, you know, feel so much appreciation for you, but are wondering how you get to the place where you're able to perform that task.
Well, I think my mindset was, I was thinking a lot of things, actually. Approaching the building, we knew that we were probably outgunned. We knew that there were people down, and we knew we needed to get to them. But in order to be effective and save the ones that we needed to, we had to go in and make sure that we stopped the threat. For me, I thought about the training that we've had leading up to this. I would be lying if I didn't say it wasn't difficult. Walking up to those doors, you know, we didn't have any cover. We didn't know where in the building the gunmen were. We didn't know exactly how many people were down, but we knew that we needed to get in there and save them, and that's what we've been trained to do. Once going through the doors, you know, there was a lot of people who were hurt. It felt odd to step past some of them, knowing that we had to find the gunmen inside. It was just like training. We trained in a large building with a lot of offices, and it was just like that. They told us it would be loud. It was. The alarms were going off. The sprinklers were on. It was cloudy or smoky. The gunpowder was heavily prevalent in the room. But in the end, I think that the training just took over. I think that we all knew what we needed to do, and we were able to stack up the way we needed to. We were able to get the people out that we could get out, and we just carried on.
Officer, what is your name, please? Everyone please identify themselves.
Yes, everyone, please.
I'm sorry, Detective Brian Lewis. Detective Brian Lewis.
Everyone identify themselves before they speak, please. Thank you.
Can another officer step forward and describe what you saw as you walked into that room and as you responded?
Yeah. My name is Officer Brett Murphy. I'm with the San Bernardino Police Department as a motor officer. I was able to get there as part of the initial entry team. When we first walked up, we do all the training and everything, but we never really, I never thought it would happen here. I never thought it would happen here. So, you know, when we're walking up, initially we saw a couple of the victims outside, and we went past, got into the building. Once we were in the building, that's when everything really hit me, you know, looking at all the victims inside. It was hard to get past that. It was really hard. I felt just emotionally, just a ton of sorrow, just in the pit of my stomach as I'm going in there. But, you know, all my partners are here with me, and it's just how you get through it. Everyone's there to get through it, and we're able to push past, go into the next hallway and keep going through the building. But it's what I experienced.
Was everyone panicked? How are people acting when you came in?
There were a lot of different reactions. Some people were laying there. Some people were crying. Some people were screaming. I mean, just pretty much everything you can imagine.
How long did it take, sorry, how long did it take you to realize that
We're
the
going to move on to the next
shooters
group.
were not in the room? I just wanted,
Go ahead. Repeat your question.
how, in other words, from the point of entry, surveying what had happened, how long did it take to realize that the shooters were not in the room?
When we entered the room, I think we fully expected to take gunfire, which we did not, which I was thankful for that. It's a larger room, so it was hard to, I visually cleared the room, didn't see anybody standing up, posing a threat with a weapon in their hand. So again, that, somewhat made me think that they were not in that room. However, when we began moving forward, in order to go on to other portions of the building, I became very fearful that possibly they were in the room and that I just had missed them and possibly had made a mistake at that point.
What is your name, please?
Mike Madden.
The next group we're going to present to you, or bring to you, is the second team in. They also assembled and went in within a minute of this first team into the IRC building. And it's going to be Officer Donald Sawyer, Corporal Scott Snyder, Corporal Mike Ernest, and Corporal John Bantine.
Can any of the officers describe what they heard over the radio and kind of you knew more perhaps than the first responders what you were entering into and what your thoughts were as you got inside? And if you could say your name, please, before you speak.
We're actually, Corporal Scott Snyder with the Fontana Police Department. We actually were in the area doing some of the follow-up, and we had noticed something with the sheriff's helicopter coming in real quick to the building. And as we were passing the building in our unmarked car, we saw people running out of the north side of the building. So at that time, we were able to activate one of our radios to the San Bernardino channel, and we had heard Lieutenant Madden saying that we had an active shooter situation. At that point, that's all we had heard. We made a U-turn immediately and parked, and then went into the building with Lieutenant Madden and the rest of my team.
Did you have any communication with any other department or agency, or were you just paying?
No, we didn't even bring a radio in with us.
Julia Lopez of KMBC, knowing that, were you also trying to work on the victims and look for suspects at the same time? Does that happen at the same time when you're going into the situation?
No, because when we entered, we came around the corner and saw the initial victims down on the ground and made entry into the actual conference room where we saw numerous other victims down. We saw the initial team just about to go into the interior of the building, and we had actually met up with them and then continued in to search the building, because at that point, our information was that there was still a shooter inside of the building.
What are your thoughts as that process is happening, that there may be shooters still inside?
My body went numb. It was overwhelming and surreal. The fact that Detective or Corporal Mike Ernest had said, as we're going in, this is real, it immediately hit home that this is not a training drill. And at that point, we just wanted to stop any threat towards any human life at that point.
What is your name, please?
Corporal Scott Snyder.
Corporal Ernest, you want to talk about the "this is real" moment?
Yeah, we first arrived on scene and overheard the radio traffic and initially met up with the San Bernardino officer because we didn't have radio communication. He was broadcasting information to us, relaying that info so that we can make our decisions. And as we went up, one of the things that went through my mind was, do we just stumble into a San Bernardino PD active shooter or critical incident? And I remember thinking, is there threats? I'm looking for training signs, which is typical what we do in a large-scale operation, is put out training signs so that everybody knows. I didn't see any training signs. And then as we made the left turn to go towards the front of the building on the east side, that's when first encountered the first down victims. That really was a defining moment at that point, and realized that this is not training. This is a very real situation, and training just kicked in at that point. And I don't remember vocalizing it, but Corporal Van Tynen recalled me saying, this is real, let's go. And we ended.
What was it like having to go past those victims on the ground and not help them so you could continue looking for the shooter?
One of the worst things I ever had experienced in my entire career. It was terrible. And I was hoping to go my whole career without seeing that.
When you were able to help people, what did they say to you and what did you say to them?
We're going to move to the next group, folks. Thank you.
Let me, real quickly, I'd like to point something out, because I think it may be missed in what we're talking about here. This was one San Bernardino police officer and 3 Fontana police officers that had never met each other before. And they simply responded, and it's part of that partnership that we talk about. We all train the same. We know what to expect when we meet up with other officers, and it's part of that overall response. And I didn't want that to get lost on this moment. Those guys did not know each other when they went in. They just went in together.
What are your names, please, the last two?
Officer Donald Sawyer.
And Corporal John Van Tynen.
Okay, now you will hear from our dispatchers from both San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department and the San Bernardino Police Department. San Bernardino Police Department handled obviously the primary call at the IRC building, as well as the, all of the radio traffic involved in that. San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department was primary in the pursuit that ended in the officer-involved shooting.
Walk us through your experience when the first calls started coming in. When did you know that it was real?
My name is Annie Teal. I was the primary radio operator. Initially, when the first calls came in, there were only 4 of us in the room, which is kind of typical for that time of day. A couple of calls came in of people hearing gunshots, and which is not atypical for San Bernardino. It was a little bit for that time of day. But then the dispatcher taking the next call stood up and we made eye contact, and she said, "This is an active shooter." I don't think my response is probably appropriate, but I did put out over the radio that it was an active shooter situation. And it's not something really that you can plan for. You have to rely on the training that you've had and the time you spent doing the job. And just kind of hope that the guys can do the thing they're supposed to do, and then you react to that, and it seems to work out pretty well.
Listening to your voices, you guys have this calmness to you, knowing that your guys are out there. There's somebody out there shooting people, possibly even them. What was your emotions as a group of hearing what's going on out there and knowing there's a situation, people are down, people are hurt, and your officers are out there?
Because the lieutenant who was the first in is our lieutenant, there was a very split second where I had a very strange, that's my dad going in there, because he's the guy that I talk to all the time in dispatch, who I go to with the issues that we have, or if there are good things happening, and it was kind of just a very brief moment where I knew him, and then he just became a voice, and you try and depersonalize everything and make it just the incident as it has to happen.
Talk about the pursuit, any dispatcher that was dealing with the pursuit itself. Please, thank you.
I didn't get it from the beginning. I got it when Deputy Whalen from Rancho Cucamonga told me he had shots being fired at him from the suspect vehicle.
Was there any point where you lost communication with the officer?
Momentarily, but when I raised my voice a little more, he answered up, and then I knew he was okay.
What went through your mind when you started to hear the gunshots?
It was terrifying. Never ever thought I would deal with anything like that. I never had in my 15-year career with the sheriff's department.
At what point do you realize the officer's been hit?
He wasn't hit. His car was, but he wasn't.
Take me through that.
Can we get your names?
Can we get your name, please?
Michelle Rodriguez.
Can you spell it? Is it E-L-L-E?
I'm Rachel Achille with the Sheriff's Department. I had the second primary channel. The pursuit was split on 2 channels with some units on Michelle's radio and some online. One of my narcotics units came up and said he was out with the San Bernardino Police Department officer who was shot, and he was okay. At that moment, my priority was letting San Bernardino PD Dispatch know that their officer was okay and was with other law enforcement.
Again, I was on primary radio and the information came over that the officer had been shot. They didn't say who it was or anything. And it stops your heart for a moment, it really does. But it was fairly shortly thereafter that somebody else came up on the radio and said who it was and that he was fine. And that's pretty much all you need to keep on going.
What's your name, please?
Annie Teal.
Okay, the next group is going to be officers from a variety of agencies that helped with the victim extrication and evacuations. And it's going to be Detective Tiffany Eamon, Detective George Lozano, Officer Angela Gentry, Officer Nathan Scarano, Officer Mike White, Officer Brian Alvarez, and Officer Jim Smith.
Were any of you the officers that we saw in that video that talked about, I'll take a bullet for you? Was that any of the officers?
That was me.
That was you. Can you describe that moment, what that was like?
It was a crazy moment. We didn't know what was going on. I was responsible for watching a hallway that some people came down the hallway, and actually it scared me because they opened the door and they didn't announce themselves, so it kind of scared me. They came into the hall, I had them walk towards me. Had them kind of like standing right in the hall. The hallway that we were watching wasn't totally clear yet. We weren't sure if there was any other shooters there. I had a partner from the Central Patrol Station who was watching the hallway for the elevator. I asked him if he was clear so I could start walking some of the hostages to the elevator to get them out. He wasn't answering me, so I had to make sure he was good, and he said he was good. And at that time, I decided to walk them out. When they were passing me, there was a female there with a small child, an 8-year-old little boy, that was just terrified, just shivering almost, to the point I was shaking like a leaf. And I said what I said. I meant what I said. I said it's for them just to kind of calm down and relax, that we were going to do everything we can to get them out of that building safely.
But did you feel exposed? Did you feel like when you opened that door, that shooter could be on the other end?
Yes, sir.
Officer, have you seen the video? What are your thoughts about it?
It's nothing short of what any other person in law enforcement would do. I don't feel like a hero whatsoever. Anyone behind me or any one of the people, 300 people that were there, would have said the same thing. That's our job, to put ourselves in the line of danger to protect the community.
Did it calm people?
Are any of you all former military? Any officers former military up there?
Did it calm people? Did it have, I mean, were your words able to calm them?
It seemed like it had an effect. Kind of calm them a little bit.
Were people initially afraid to follow you?
I think so. They were a little hesitant because they didn't know what was going on.
How long were you with the department and how long were people inside that room, they were in there 30 minutes. Were you with them the entire time?
I know.
How long have you been with the department?
15 years.
What's your name, sir?
Detective George Lozano.
What? You say again, sir? Your name?
Detective George Lozano.
Can you give us somebody's name, please?
I don't see.
One more question for this group? Anybody else in the group?
The chief had mentioned working together, being from different groups. When you come into a situation like that where you're trying to find survivors and help people out of the building, what's that like when you don't know each other? You guys are trying to help people out of the building. It's okay. Trying to work that way.
On behalf of the San Bernardino County Probation Department, we deployed approximately, I think we've estimated about 100 officers that day. I don't think we were looking at faces or names or relationships within that moment. It was more about a collaborative effort. It wasn't jurisdictional. It wasn't rank. It was people, officers helping each other do the job that needed to get done. We took direction from the San Bernardino Police Department and the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department and our incident commanders. And I can speak for the men and women of our department that we were support staff. That was our main function, to be support staff out there and to do whatever we needed to do to make the other officers' jobs easier. And we did various functions within the incident, including setting up triage, pulling people out, injured victims out. We brought food and water to the scene. The smallest of things, transporting. We also transported some of the witnesses back to the Hernandez Center. Personally, I had a variety of roles in it, but I think we all did. And on behalf of our department, that's what we do. The doctrine of our department and of all law enforcement is to act.
Officer Gentry, did you by any chance move some victims? Did you not stop at
I did not.
I did. My name is Nathan Scarano. I'm a supervising probation officer with San Bernardino County Probation Department's Criminal Intelligence Unit. My partner and I were the first probation officers on scene on the east side of the building, at which time we recognized some of the first entry teams that you heard going into the building. We recognized a number of victims clustered in the parking lot between the vehicles. They were asking for help and asking for first aid. I went and contacted the first cluster of victims, recognizing that officers were making entry into the building to subdue the threat, at which time I recognized that there were several with gunshot wounds. Immediately, I recognized those wounds as life-threatening, and I advised my partner to lower the bed of his truck because we have unmarked vehicles, and we began loading up the victims immediately. Between his vehicle and mine, we evacuated between 15 and 17 with 5 shot at that time. We immediately returned and began a train of probation vehicles where we started loading up victims into the vehicles so we can evacuate them to a triage area so that they could be rendered aid. It was very breathtaking. It was, I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it. The coordination between all the agencies was amazing in that evacuation, in that operation altogether. And it was an event filled with sudden change.
Does anything any of those victims said to you stand out in your mind?
Yeah.
What?
I'd rather not say.
Officer Brian Alvarez with the California Highway Patrol. I wanted to add just a little bit to what Officer Gentry said in regards to the mutual collaboration between all the departments. And I think one of the reasons we all come running is because that's what we signed up for. This is what we trained for. And my deepest condolences to the victims and the families. They didn't sign up for this. This is not, they were having a holiday party, they were going to work. This is not what they expected to encounter that day. We train for these types of things. Never thought I would see it, but we did. And I agree with Officer Gentry when she says that we all were just wanting to help, whatever the little part was, or a big part.
When you talk about helping, did you also provide some of that initial triage?
Not the initial triage. What we assisted with were with closures, the perimeter, setting up a perimeter, making sure that if the shooter was still at the scene, that they didn't get out. Also, we helped escort the buses to the Rock Church where they were, or the victims where they were going to be interviewed. Another thing that was happening is while we were at the perimeters, is we had, once the word got out, family members started coming, wanting to find their family members. And so it was really important for our officers to know where their families were going and how long the process was going to take, because it was a lengthy process. So there was a lot of moving parts to the scene.
Tiffany Eamon. Several of the other detectives and I were some of the first responders in the room, and between about 10 of us, we carried out all the victims out of the room and handed them off to all these other agencies that came out to help us. So many detectives that aren't here today went in that room as well to get the victims out.
Can you describe what the room looked like? We've seen some pictures of people getting awards before this happened, but can you tell us when you walked in what that room looked like?
The room looked like chaos. The worst party you can imagine. Trash thrown everywhere, food everywhere, tables and chairs broken, people laying on the floor.
Did anyone say anything to you?
I think we're going to move on to the next group. Thank you. The next group that you're going to hear from are those that were involved in the actual officer-involved shooting and the pursuit that led to that. That's going to be Officer Nicholas Kawahu, Deputy Sean Whalen, Deputy Bruce Southward, Detective Chad Johnson, Sergeant Andy Capps, Officer Joe Aguilar, and Officer Matthias Knudsen.
Nicholas, take us through the pursuit.
All right, we ended up following the suspects from Redlands. So they went up Tippy Canoe. I had flagged down Sergeant Capps back here for a bartender to stop. They got up to the suspects around Tippy Canoe and Gould, and the suspects kept going. Lights and sirens running, they kept going. As soon as they made their turn onto San Bernardino Avenue eastbound, that's when I started hearing the first gunshots coming from the suspect vehicle. We made it past Richardson, and I saw everybody stopping in front of me. And I started hearing more gunshots coming from that suspect vehicle at that time.
Were you taking fire?
Yes.
Were you hit?
I was.
What happened?
I saw Deputy Wallen from the Sheriff's Department was a ways ahead of me, and looked to be the closest to the suspect's vehicle. After exchanging gunfire with the male, I was trying to get to Deputy Wallen and trying to bring him back to cover. As I was running up to the corner, I was struck in the left thigh. I was trying to get to Deputy Warren and bring him back to me to get to that cover, though, at that time.
That was a close call.
I'm sorry?
That was a close call.
It certainly was.
At that time, were you taking on gunfire by the male as well as the female? And lastly, could you see who was actually in the back firing?
At that time, when I was running, when I was hit, the male was already down in the street. So I did not know who was in the back of that car shooting at us, but I could hear rifle fire coming out of the back of that car. Could also hear my teammates that I was with at that time, as well as the officers and deputies that are up here, returning fire at that vehicle. They did an amazing job trying to keep that person inside that vehicle.
So you know now that was Tosh being fired at you?
I do now.
What was going through your mind when you were hit?
Initially when I went down, I felt like somebody punched me in the leg. I stumbled and fell into the corner of shedding. I was in the Marine Corps, so I've been taught since then, and in the police training that I've received now, that you're never out of the fight. You got to keep fighting. I looked down at my leg, I saw that there was a bullet hole in it, but I quickly assessed myself. Another deputy came up and rendered some aid while I laid down covering fire for him. And when I got back up to my feet, That's when the officers had brought a unit up to try to extract me from the gunfight that was still happening from that suspect vehicle.
Can you describe the amount of gunfire? We heard that there were 76 rounds fired at you guys, 380 rounds fired back. What is that like to be there? What does that sound like? What does that feel like?
That was constant gunfire. You know, at some point you just kind of stop hearing your shots because there's just so much noise there. You still hear it, but it's not one of those things that you can hear the individual burst of gunfire. It was an overwhelming sound the entire time.
Did you hear the shooters make any?
I was not in combat. No.
Did you hear the shooters make any statements at all?
No statements.
And does this compare to anything that happened to you in the Marines?
I was with a unit that was in overseas, so with that initial training from boot camp up until the police department and police academy, is training that we've all received, and there's classes when you go to the academy that you're never out of that fight. So I do have to say that my team that was with me initially, they deserve a lot of credit because they were running towards that gunfire as well.
What is your name, please?
My name is Nicholas. My last name is Karahu.
We have a couple other folks here if you want to direct some questions to them.
San Bernardino Police Department.
Did anyone else in the pursuit hear anything coming from a suspect's car, shooter's car, vehicle, anything like that?
Sergeant Andy Capps for the Redlands Police Department. The only thing we heard coming from the suspect's car was gunfire. From the first time they started shooting at us until it was all over.
Sergeant, I'm sure, it happens to all of you, but when you hear or see one of your officers fall with a gunshot wound, your mentality has to change immediately at that point. Take me through that.
When I heard that an officer was down, it bothered me momentarily, but the fight was still on. And so I couldn't be more proud of the guys that are up here and the people I work with. I heard people forming up a team and going to rescue the officer that was down. And the best news is he's okay and he's up here to tell us his story, that he lived. But, the bravest people in the world, I couldn't be more proud. But there was still work to do. And so I knew that everybody knew what their job was and that they would take care of business, and that's exactly what they did. So I wasn't worried about it, and I was super glad to hear that he was going to be okay, which we learned quickly out there.
And the chief mentioned it earlier, different agencies at this point, you don't know if someone's going to do their job or if someone's just going to do whatever they have to do, but it seems like everybody's worked together.
I was 100% certain that everybody was going to do their job, and that's stop the threat, catch those people, and get home safe to their families.
After the suspects were killed, there was the concern that what is in that truck. Walk us through the process after you think that they're down.
That might be a better question for anybody here that responded up on those armored vehicles or something like that, because I stayed where I was behind cover. We saw armored vehicles coming down the street, and there were members of tactical teams that went up to that vehicle to clear it and make sure it was safe. They had the right equipment. They were the ones that were prepared to handle that mission, and they did.
Who was the officer that
I think we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the next group.
Can we ask just one more question with this group?
No, I think we're going to think. I'm sorry. The next group are members of the San Bernardino City Fire Department who rendered aid to many victims out there at the Inland Regional Center. And that's Captain Greg Soria, Captain Jason Serrano, Engineer John Miller, and paramedic firefighter Cody Strickland.
What do you say to people who are going through this situation to calm them down? How do you deal with people in this situation?
John Miller, fire engineer, City of San Bernardino. Best thing we could do is just be there to comfort them. Let them know that we're there to help them, give them the best treatment that they deserve, and get them off to a hospital to get them a higher level of care.
Take us through the injuries you saw initially when you came in.
Horrific. Been around here 11 years in the city. I've never seen a scene like it before in my life. It was bad.
Where were they shot? Can you,
Who else can talk about what they saw there?
Or what they heard, were the folks that you were helping, talking to you, what kind of things were they saying?
I can speak more to the fact that when we initially staged and waited for PD to get there and clear the scene for us, which truly was never clear, as we found out later. But with our training, we were able to get on scene quickly. We hit the floor running. We had predetermined assignments prior to getting to the scene. And probation, by the way, probation and the other agencies that helped out did a phenomenal job getting those patients initially out to us. But there was a time where we decided to go ahead and make entry even though the scene was not safe. And what helped us with that was one of our engineers is a SWAT medic that was with the team training that day. And he came out to find us, and the look on his face said everything. They needed help in there. And so we went ahead and made entry. The officers did a great job covering us to get in there. We assisted with getting the last few victims out. And yeah, again, the scene was something that all the training experience really doesn't train you for. And,
Talk to us about your coordination, because I was up there right after the situation happened. And by my calculations, from the time you guys received those victims and they were off to the hospital, it was somewhere within 14 and a half minutes. I could be wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. We received the call at 11:02 a.m. We had our first unit, Engine 11, staging at 11:05. From the time we received the first patient, we transported 17 victims under 15 minutes to local hospitals. Two were by air, the rest were by ground. And of those 17, I believe 14 were listed as critical or immediate.
Now, I noticed that it was a sheriff rescue helicopter where some of the cases were elderly, and I think that was phenomenal.
Absolutely.
The coordination you guys had with not only ground ambulance, but the sheriff air rescue as well.
Yes. Again, like police officers and law enforcement in general, we had outside agencies come in as mutual aid, and we all train alike. We use the multi-casualty incident protocols. That's a nationwide recognized system, and we're all trained the same. So when we come together, we're able to do what's best for the greater good of everyone on scene.
As a first responder, you see a lot of horrific things. How does this compare?
This is absolutely the worst thing that I've encountered in my career, 16 years on the job. And San Bernardino City is not an easy city to work in. And we train a lot, but more so, we do have the experience. And we're able collectively to bring that to the table and apply it to this very out of the ordinary incident.
Captain, did you apply any life-saving efforts to anyone in the room that did not make it, or were they all gone?
To that, I'll say we used a multi-casualty incident protocol, and there's something called start triage, and we're able to prioritize those people. And again, our purpose and our goal is to do the greatest good for as many people as we can.
In addition to the medical help you were offering them, what kind of emotional support were you giving the victims, because they had to be needing it pretty badly?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Captain Serrano step up and answer some of those questions for you.
What is your name, sir? Captain Jason Serrano, San Bernardino City Fire. And who just spoke, please?
Soria, Greg Soria, S-O-R-I-A.
Can you repeat the question, please?
In addition to the medical treatment you were administering, what kind of emotional support were you having to give these people?
I think our personnel did a phenomenal job providing that emotional support for those people that were coming out. And working in conjunction with our law enforcement officers who did a phenomenal job pulling those victims out of the scene and pulling up to our treatment area. We were able to scoop them out of those vehicles and basically triage them there once again at that location and initiate our treatments there. Anytime you have any sort of victims that have experienced this kind of event or something similar, they're going to be very emotional. And I think our responders as well were very emotional. And we were doing our best to comfort them and tell them that they were safe reassuring them that we are going to get them to a medical facility as soon as possible. We administered IVs on scene. We treated various, obviously, gunshot wounds and traumatic injuries that they had. And secondarily, we also didn't want to forget, once all those patients were off scene, we didn't want to forget the rest of the folks that were out there on that golf course. And we did make a secondary sweep of all of them, and it turned out that there was some additional people there that did need some aid rendered to them.
Sir, did you have any indication of how many casualties or how many victims you were going to be walking
Last
into?
question. Thank you. Sorry, can you repeat the
Do
question?
you have any indication walking in there of knowing how many victims you were going to meet?
We had an idea, anytime that the fire department responds with our San Bernardino PD, we do have the capability of monitoring their traffic. And so in listening to that traffic, several of our engine company captains, myself included, did attach ourselves to the call, even though we weren't initially dispatched, because we heard just the anxiety in the voice of all the officers that were on scene. We knew that this was a serious event and that we needed to get on scene to assist.
So as we said when this thing started, we had hundreds of officers that responded to this, and obviously they're not all here. And I can say too that not every single agency is represented here. There were many agencies that may have just had 1 or 2 officers there. There were several fire departments that came in to help out as well. We wanted to give you guys the opportunity to hear from them. We know that there's been a lot of requests for them to tell their stories, but we're also sensitive to the fact that there's a lot of victims in this, and that is incredibly important to us, and we don't want this necessarily to be about us. And I think everybody up here appreciates the words of encouragement and the appreciation that's been expressed to them. But from this point forward, we'd like to focus on the victims. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for your service, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.